President Donald Trump is expected to do it. He's going to abolish the Department of Education. At least that's what they're saying, right? Now, a draft of the executive order, because he wants to do it through executive action, it was detailed by several news outlets ahead of the expected announcement. Some said it was going to be yesterday, could be today, we don't really know. But this also aligns with what Trump had promised early in his campaign. The plan, he said, right, is to have the school system handled by the states, not by the federal government, although the federal government will probably be involved to an extent. Wall Street Journal said this: President Trump is expected to issue an executive order as soon as Thursday, being yesterday, aimed at abolishing the education department, according to people briefed on the matter. It says a draft of the order, suggesting he already wrote it, viewed by the Wall Street Journal, directs Education Secretary Linda McCannon to take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the education department based on the maximum extent appropriate and permitted by law, meaning maybe they won't get rid of everything, but probably most of it. Now, it says the order has been in the works since Trump's transition. In early February, the Journal reported that administration officials were considering such a move, and they said, quote, the experiment of controlling American education through federal programs and dollars and the unaccountable bureaucrats whose programs and dollars support has failed our children, our teachers, and our families. The draft order reads. And it notes the draft viewed by the Journal was labeled as pre-decisional, suggesting it could change, right? Maybe they won't go with that. Maybe they will. We'll have to see. Now, look, first off, Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt posted on X saying this, quote, more fake news. President Trump is not signing an executive order on the Department of Education today, saying it's not going to happen. She said, this is just about timing, in my opinion. An order could still be in the pipeline. On her point, we did not see Trump do anything yesterday, so she was right. It was fake news. It was going to come out yesterday. But she is saying that, well, something might be in the works, meaning, well, the release may have been fake news, but the whole thing on whether he's going to do it, that might not be. Because remember, Trump actually campaigned on reforming the education system in America. And his pick for education secretary, that's Linda McCannon, she was confirmed earlier this week. But before her confirmation, Trump already mentioned that he hoped she would do such a great job that she would put herself out of a job. Watch this.
And on the education department, why nominate Linda McMahon to be the education department secretary if you're going to get rid of the education?
Because I told Linda, I hope you do a great job and put yourself out of a job. I want her to put herself out of a job. Education department. So we're ranked number 40 out of 40 schools, right? We're ranked number 1 in cost per pupil. So we spend more per pupil than any other country in the world. And we're ranked at the bottom of the list. We're ranked very badly. And what I want to do is let the states run schools. I believe strongly in school choice. But in addition to that, I want the states to run schools. And I want Linda to put herself out of a job.
This isn't really far-fetched that he might get rid of the Department of Education, because not only all this, going back to September of 2023, Donald Trump released his, quote, 10 principles for great schools leading to great jobs on his campaign website. And these are what he said. 1, restoring parental rights. 2, great principals, great teachers, knowledge and skills, not CRT, critical race theory, and gender indoctrination. Love of country, freedom to pray, safe, secure, and drug-free, universal school choice, meaning they can give you money and you can decide where you want to put that, maybe private school, maybe something else, maybe homeschool. Project-based learning, internships and work experiences, jobs and career counseling. And in announcing these 10 principles, it said Trump also mentioned the closing the Department of Education. Let me show you. Watch.
And one other thing I'll be doing very early in the administration is closing up the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and sending all education and education work and needs back to the states. We want them to run the education of our children because they'll do a much better job of it. You can't do worse. We spend more money per pupil by 3 times than any other nation, and yet we're absolutely at the bottom. We're one of the worst. So you can't do worse. We're going to end education coming out of Washington, D.C. We're going to close it up, all those buildings all over the place, and you have people that in many cases hate our children. We're going to send it all back to the states.
You know, given that statement, it's probably not too far-fetched to assume he might get rid of the Department of Education because he said he would. But look, to be clear, this would not get rid of the public education system. I think this is where a lot of the misconceptions are. This just would put the power back in the hands of the states and in the hands of the teachers like it used to be. They'll get the kind of say on how the schools are actually run. And it's important to mention also, the Department of Education is not that old. It only started operating in 1980. We had schools before 1980, and the quality of education of America's schools were significantly better. Literacy rates, they've taken a nosedive since the Department of Education was formed. And this was made even worse, I should note, with the introduction of Common Core education. That was under the Obama administration, and that federalized education. And the effect of that was it stripped a lot of authority from the teachers. They suddenly had a lot less say on what they taught, how they taught, and schools also had a lot less say in what they did. It basically centralized the power within the federal government. On this point also, though, it does not seem that Trump is planning to fully disengage the federal government from education, with or without the DOE. He's talked about programs like school choice, which could, give parents the money that they would have spent in taxes for public schools. And the way it would work is instead of spending that, just having it delegated to the teachers' unions and everything else and how it goes, well, that money would go to the kids directly and the parents. That means they could put the money into private schools or online classes, which if you homeschool, it costs a lot of money, or into textbooks, for example. And it may come as a shock because of the huge amounts of bureaucracy. Americans pay more money per kid for public schools than it would cost to get them into a very good private school. You can get your kid into a very good private school for less money than what we pay in taxes to put them in a very bad public school. So, this could really start a new movement for schooling. We could potentially see a lot of new schools spring up across the United States if they have this universal school choice program. And this would also mean that if schools are not doing well, if you have kids graduating with honors and they never even learned how to read, which is actually happening with public schools. There's even a lawsuit on that right now. Kids are illiterate and they're graduating with honors. How does that even happen? Well, you can expect the school that did that to go out of business, because what will happen is parents and kids will be given better options. Ironically, this is one of the arguments used against this. They say, well, the public schools will all close down. Well, yeah, if they offer a worse product than the good ones, right? It'll basically force them to compete with the private schools, and a lot of them don't want to do that, which is why it's being blocked currently, although we will see what happens. Now look, on another topic, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., now head of HHS, he is taking actions to stop the spread of measles. He's saying this is now a top priority of HHS, and he's also now sending vaccine doses to areas that have been affected. Epoch Times said this: Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the new U.S. Health Secretary, said that a measles outbreak in western Texas that has infected more than 100 people and led to 1 death, now they say 2, is a top priority for his agency, and said that vaccines will be provided. Further, it says, he said that his agency, the Department of Health and Human Services, would send Texas 2,000 doses of measles, mumps, and rubella MMR vaccine through its immunization program. Now, some people saw this and said, oh no, RFK is going to force people to take the vaccines. It's only 2,000 doses. And again, Trump has been fairly against any kind of mandatory vaccines, so we'll see. But it says this, quote, additionally, HHS will provide lab support to better track the virus causing the outbreak and will communicate with public health officials every day in all affected areas to support their response and ensure they have the resources they need. and to also provide communications to local communities in Low German, the language used by Mennonites, because they're saying the outbreak is happening within the Mennonite community. Now, it's not clear whether open border policies also affected that. Some people have speculated. Hypothetically speaking, if you have people coming in from every corner of the world and they might not have vaccine schedules in the countries they're coming from, while they could be sick, they could also get people sick as they cross over. We don't know if that's the cause. All we know now is that within the Mennonite communities, there are outbreaks. What caused it? Maybe we'll find out. But also alongside these efforts, the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, they're apologizing to some of the government employees who were fired. They acted a little too hastily and fired a little too many of them. And they're now asking some of them to return to work. Now, the CDC is part of the on-the-ground operations fighting against this whole outbreak, and as part of the government response to help stop the measles spread in Texas and now in a few other states. Now, again, you're hearing this is a big thing. It's just a little over 100 cases. Still a big deal, but not like a massive outbreak. They're trying to contain it. We'll see what happens.